they knocked at the door, okay? And normally, I don't answer the door. But this time, I opened the door. They were Bible Christians. We're gonna call this story The Day I Totally Screwed Up, or The Bible Christians with No Bibles, or Don't Ever Say That to a Bible Christian. They come in and we go in the living room to sit down on the couch and we're making small talk, right? So about kids and, dogs and all that stuff, right? It was an older couple, a man and a woman, and they're there for 5, 7, 10 minutes, and all we've done is made small talk. There's no, Jesus Christ hasn't come out yet. No Bibles have come out yet. It's like they didn't know what they were doing. It's like this was their first time. I felt bad. So I wanted to help. I said, do you guys need a Bible? I've got the King James Bible. They weren't interested. They didn't want, nothing. I know how to get this going. I'm gonna tell them I'm Catholic. That'll get it going. Take a deep breath. Here we go. I look them in the eye and I say, I'm Catholic. Oh, how about that? We were Catholic too. Wait, what? I don't know why this surprises me. I've heard this 1,000 times. Why does this still surprise me? This time, for some reason, I don't know, it completely surprised me. What? You were Catholic? Yeah, we were Catholic. Back when we lived in Houston, we were Catholic. That explains why they didn't have Bibles. You were Catholic? Why did you leave the church? Let me tell you about that. We were at Mass once, and the priest, oh no, he got up to give his homily, okay? Tell me about the homily, okay? What awful thing did he preach in the homily? He gets up, and he starts using an analogy. An analogy? An analogy. An analogy? Yes, he uses an analogy. An analogy of what? It was an analogy of a hamburger. An analogy of a hamburger? Are you serious? An analogy of a hamburger? Yes, he used an analogy of a hamburger. A hamburger? Why would he use the analogy of a hamburger? Well, he said that the bread was like the church and the meat was like the sacraments. I don't remember. He used an analogy of a hamburger? Yes, he used an analogy of a hamburger at Mass. That was his Sunday sermon, was this hamburger thing. Wait a minute. Let me think about that for a minute. So there's all these kids there who are completely not paying attention ever to the homily, right? And the priest gets up there and starts talking about hamburgers, and they all love hamburgers, and they're all going to go to McDonald's right after Mass, and then when they're at McDonald's, the mom could say, hey, does that remind you of something that the priest said during the Mass today? This guy's a genius. It's kind of like how Jesus used to use parables when he was teaching about the kingdom. Wow. I'm sorry, what was the problem? Why did you leave the Catholic Church? Suffice to say, there was no scandal. This priest was a preaching genius. We should all learn. We should all be using the hamburger analogy. It was awesome, especially during Sunday Mass. That sounded I was expecting some kind of dramatic punchline, right? I was like, okay, he's going to launch on this whole tirade about scandals and stuff, right? Nope. The Houston priest sounds awesome. Sounds like homily was great, right? Why'd you leave the Catholic Church? This just made me more mad. You left the Catholic Church for a good homily? With all the bad homilies, you left for a good homily? Really? Everything that happens in the story up till now was probably very ecumenical, right? Everything. But now, everything that comes after this is what not to do when you're talking to a Bible Christian. In the comments below, put down there the dumbest thing you've ever said in a religious argument that totally tipped the scales and everything went completely out of control after that. Go ahead, be honest, admit down there in the bottom. So from this point forward, ignore everything. Don't do any of this stuff, okay? So I grab my Bible and I flip it over to John chapter 6. So I start shouting out scriptures from John chapter 6 about the true presence of Jesus Christ, right? You know, you've always wanted to do that. Like, hey, explain this to me. You say Bible alone, explain this to me, right? You've always wanted to do that, right? Well, I did it, okay? FYI, don't do that. That's completely the wrong approach. And this gentleman, who had been totally Christian up to this point, all of a sudden erupts in this rage, like Jesus in the temple, tossing over tables. I'm gonna pray for your soul. He's completely lost his mind. He's yelling at me. He was shaking the dust from his feet. There was no dust. It was carpet. It was my living room. There might have been like some dog hair. And my wife, who never gets involved in these things, comes storming out of the bedroom, and she starts yelling back at him, "How dare you come into my house and talk to my husband this way?" I was pretty impressed. She was, so I asked her about it. I was like, "Hey, I didn't even know you were interested in apologetics." And she's like, "No, I wasn't. He just woke me up from my nap." And I was like, "Oh, that makes sense." The guy's running out of the house. He's shaking the dust. He's yelling at me, "No priest can do that." He's getting into the passenger side of his car. His wife, so she turns on the car, and I'm walking around the driveway there, and she rolls down the window as the car is backing out of the driveway. And she does this kind of thing. I walk over. In a very calm voice, she says, "Praying to Jesus is about having a relationship with Jesus. It's not about saying memorized prayers over and over again. It's about actually talking to Jesus from your heart." And as she's saying these words, the back tires, I'll never forget it, the back tires of her car roll right out of the driveway into the street. And I make eye contact with her. And I realize what the problem was. I realize why they left the church. They left the church because they spent 30 years in this church. And no one ever told them what prayer was. No one ever mentioned it to them. I just had them in my house for 15 minutes, and all I did was yell at them. They spent all of that time in this church, and no one ever told them about the rich Catholic legacy of prayer. I had like 1/10 of a second left to tell her everything that I knew about prayer, to make her understand that Catholics aren't just reciting memorized prayers, that we actually have this deep, passionate relationship with Christ. But I stood there dumbfounded. I didn't have anything to say. And that car just rolled into the street, and they drove off. And to this day, I regret not telling them what it was that God sent them to my front door for me to tell them. My ego, my head got in the way. I was going to have an academic theological debate with this guy, when the reason why they came there is because God wanted me to tell her about how to pray to him. Missed the whole thing completely. On next week's video, I'm going to tell you what I wish I would have told them. And maybe if you know the Catholics from Houston that left the church over the hamburger, you can send them that video and apologize to them for me. Please subscribe to this channel, check out our other YouTube channel, Laudare, and check out our Catholic blog, laudare.org. Thanks for watching.